All right, today I'm going to talk about the Sabbath. We think that the Sabbath is a day, and it is not. It's not Sunday, it's not Saturday. The Sabbath is getting to God, getting to the resting place, which is the stillness of God. So peace, be still, and know that I am God. That stillness is the beingness of God. It is not the action of God in the creation, but it is the stillness, the beingness of God. In that core place is the intensity of the resurrection. That's how we are resurrected. That's how the world is resurrected. That's how the ascension is made. But as everything is in religion, it has been reduced to a day, because the human mind will take information, will take truth, spiritual truth, and will eventually reduce it to mundane things, to worldly things. And so we've taken this idea of the Sabbath, which means to get back to the core beingness of God, where the resurrection is happening, and they made it into a day, and then they start arguing about what day it is. Who cares what day it is? Because it's not even a day. The number 7 is completion, is the fulfillment of something. Now, God creates, it's an action. He created the creation, and then he goes back into beingness. And that's what we need to do, because we're made in the image of God. So we do exactly what he does. We create, we go out doing things, we take action, and action doesn't mean just physical action, it's thought action, emotional action, intention action, word action. And then we go back into the stillness of being, the core of being, where there's the resurrection, or grace, which is the same thing. So when we receive the Holy Spirit, we're in grace. That's the Spirit of God, which resurrects everything. And so the reason we need to have a Sabbath is so that all of the things that we have done throughout the day, throughout the week, gets to meet grace, gets to be restored back to God. That core beingness, which is the intensified light, intensified presence of God that will bring us grace, that will restore everything that we have done. We need to bring all of that back to God as often as possible, which is why Paul said, pray unceasingly. Now, I've heard people say, pastors say, you only need to pray for something once. It's like, no, you need to pray unceasingly. You need to keep praying, keep connecting with the Spirit of God. Now, in the book of Enoch, there are 7 levels of heaven. And I like that idea, because we're getting closer to God. Even if we haven't received the Spirit of God yet, we're getting closer to that. And there's some transformation in that elevation through the levels until we get to the throne room and we are in the presence of God. And that is the resurrection. That's when we have grace. So when we're traveling toward God with our thoughts, our emotions, our intentions, our actions, our words, we're doing better. But as I said, we're still human. And so we are still creating and doing things that may fall out of the will of God. And so we need to go back to God as often as possible into that Sabbath, into that rest, into that stillness, to receive that grace, to be resurrected, to have everything that we've done resurrected back to the will of God. Now, that's why throughout the Old Testament, when somebody does something that they shouldn't on the Sabbath, like the man collecting sticks on the Sabbath, the people are told to stone him to death. Now, they're not really supposed to stone somebody to death. That is not love. That is not godly. But what it is saying is, we're bringing that upon ourselves when we don't go into the Sabbath period, which is to go to God, meditate on God, contemplate God, be with God, let his Spirit transform us and everything that we have done. If we don't do that, then everything that we have done is out of God's will, and that is spiritual death. And so that's why they say people who do things on the Sabbath are killed, because they're not punished for their sin, they are punished by their sin. And the sin is not going into the stillness where grace is, to restore everything that they have done. So the Sabbath is not a day. It is getting into the stillness of God, which is why we need to come away from the world as often as possible and be in contemplation, but transformative contemplation. The kind of contemplation where you're interacting with the Spirit of God, of grace, so that it can resurrect and restore and redeem all of your actions. We want to get to the place where we are with God all the time. We're in that stillness where we can just be out and about doing things and just get into the stillness. We can do that anywhere. And if we practice that, then what we're doing is we're getting into the Sabbath all the time. So it doesn't have to be a week. It doesn't have to be a year. It just means getting to that Sabbath, into the stillness of God, where the resurrection is, and let it do its transformative work in you to restore you back to God's will.